What's going on, YouTube? Once again, thoughts of a African American software developer. So I'm going to title this video "The Only Constant in This Business is Change." So as you can see, here's a this video. I'm showing my bookshelf, my library books that I've purchased throughout the years. Some of these books are obsolete. The technology is no longer being used in some of these books, or have been replaced with other technologies. And in some cases, technology never goes out of use. It's just out of favor, but it's being used. It's still being used in legacy applications. Whereas the company may have made a huge investment in, and the software is running, so they are still using these, the older programming languages, older technologies. So, it's so the technology still can be in use. So that's why I keep some of my older books around, because I may take on a project that has that's using these older technologies, and I'll still have the reference material around, because sometimes it may be hard to even find the reference material. So getting back to the topic. The only constant is change. So this is basically for someone that's getting into programming, that wants to get into programming, and want to know what it takes to be a programmer. So as I said previously, when you get into this business of software development programming, it's a commitment to lifetime learning. You're committing yourself to lifetime learning. And in that case, you'll be, committing yourself to learning, acquiring skills that may be obsolete in a couple years, may be replaced in a couple years. So you have to prepare yourself for those changes. When I first started writing code, one of the first languages I learned was a mainframe language called COBOL in the early 90s. So COBOL was a widely, and it's still used in corporate mainframe environments. So COBOL is a procedural-based language. At that time, it was one of the most highly sought out skill sets for programming. If you're programming in the corporate world, you had to know COBOL. So in a short amount of time, I say within 5 years, so I started off COBOL. I started off programming in COBOL. When I got out of school near the mid-90s, a new paradigm shift came in with the, let's say, PC-based languages. So you had now PCs were taking over corporate America. Prior to that, they had mainframe and dumb terminals. Prior to the 90s, a lot of the programming was for mainframe dumb terminals. So you had COBOL writing a lot of that software. So in the 90s, you had PC began taking over corporate America, and then you had client-server model come out. So client-server is basically a client, which is the workstation, the computer, accessing data on a server, server on their network. So that's a client-server model. And those programming languages were Visual Basic. You had a language called Power Builder at that time. That was a big corporate language for building client-server applications. And also C++. So C++, Power Builder, and Visual Basic. So they had a good run. They had a 5-year run, I say. So there was a huge demand for Visual Basic developers, Power Builder developers, C++ on the front end, middle tier developers. C++ is still language that's in demand for writing low level, doing low level programming. So that was like right prior to the internet being widely adopted. So around maybe mid to late 90s, you started seeing the rapid adoption of internet as a platform by corporate America. Middle to late 90s. And with that, brought a shift in the programming languages. So one of the first languages that took advantage of the internet was a language called Perl. So you had Perl CGI, which enabled you to write dynamic web pages on the internet. Prior to that, you would create static web pages that did almost, it didn't do much. But Perl CGI gave you the ability to write dynamic web pages that allowed information to be procured from a remote server, from a database, and then put on the web. So you could do web reporting. You could do Perl CGI allowed you to send and receive information from the website to the back end. So you were allowed to save information. So Perl CGI gave you that ability to do so. Java also came on the scene as a web-based programming, a solution for programming on the internet. So Java came out with its front end language called Java Servlets, and then JSP, this language here, JSP, which is part of the servlet library. It was more updated, maybe a year or two after Java Servlets came out. JSP came on the scene. So that's another change. So the corporate environment went from Perl CGI for writing web to writing using servlets and JSPs, which is Java. So Java became the predominant language for writing dynamic web pages. you know. And then a couple years pass, writing dynamic web pages. So someone says, oh, you know, we can use that JavaScript and write asynchronous JavaScript. So instead of using JSPs on the front end, well, you can use JSPs along with Ajax, along with asynchronous JavaScript, and create, you know, dynamic web pages that did things. So that was another thing that you had to learn if you were a web-based developer. If you were a web-based developer, so yeah, you're learning asynchronous JavaScript. That was the first iteration of dynamic pages using a pure HTML JavaScript model. And then you had languages that leverage Ajax. You had jQuery. So jQuery leveraged Ajax, asynchronous JavaScript, and made it more user-friendly for a developer. So that like the original Ajax was more cumbersome programming. So jQuery simplified some of that process, writing some of that code. So you know, you had to learn jQuery. And jQuery is still widely used today. So I mean, you know, this is still a very popular used JavaScript library. You know, also now we have Angular being used. So Angular is a widely used front-end web tool for building web and mobile applications. And what Angular does, it uses JavaScript, HTML, CSS in the Angular framework. So, you know, using Angular, you need to know JavaScript, CSS, HTML. Also, I say up until previously, there was another language out and another development platform for writing dynamic web pages, and that was called Flash. So back in the day, Flash was the language to learn. So you remember those annoying Flash websites? So Flash was the language to learn how, because Flash allowed you to write dynamic web-based applications. There was a big gaming developer. There was a lot of gaming developer. A lot of games were written in Flash before HTML5 came out. So Flash was a closed source product by Adobe. So Adobe didn't want to share that source code. And what happened was Adobe, there were a lot of security vulnerabilities with using Flash. So Flash fell out of favor when Steve Jobs said, iPhone will not support Flash. So Flash went from, a highly sought after skill set to have to people, to nothing overnight when Steve Jobs said iPhone will not support Flash, because Flash was looking to do, Flash was looking to have a mobile presence and web presence. And when Steve Jobs said, we're not supporting Flash, it went from a very sought after skill set to nothing at all. So, you put in a lot of time, effort, learning Flash, and all of a sudden, boom, you have to go back to the drawing board. And that has happened in you know, a number of times. In my case, you know, it's like, this is why you have to, as a developer, you have to commit yourself to learning, because the technology is going to change every 3 to 5 years. Nah, I say every 3 years at the least. Every 3 years at the least, there's going to be a shift. Even in, you know, the established languages like Java 8, Java 5. They created significant changes in the Java programming paradigm, in the way you write Java code, in the way you handle, you know, do multi-threading, and Java 8 writing anonymous functions, and the way it handles, the way the collections are handled in Java. So even in working in established languages, you're going to have to upgrade your skills, because these languages come out with different versions every 2 to 3 years. And in those updates, they come out with significant changes in the platform and how you write code. So to conclude this, you know, it's just, you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to commit yourself to learning if you want to be a programmer. You know, you cannot be complacent if you're in this field, because complacency is going to make you obsolete within 5 years. Even if you get a corporate job and you're working on a platform that seems fairly secure, you know, you could get 5, even 10 years. I've written programs that lasted 8 years. So the technology is obsolete, but they decided to use it because it worked. But eventually that platform got replaced. So there is no security in this, except the only security is your ability to learn, your ability to pick up skills and learn. And with that, I'm going to say peace, you know. Have a good day.